Every great leader has a defining story, a pivotal moment that challenged them, changed them, and revealed how they truly lead. Leadership Unlocked explores those stories and the tools that emerged from them, giving listeners a model of intentional, resilient, and values-driven leadership. Welcome to Leadership Unlocked, where we uncover the pivotal stories that shape extraordinary leaders. I'm Dusty Holcomb, and on this show, we don't just talk about leadership, we decode it. In every episode, we sit down with change makers who walk through the fire, challenge the status quo, and emerge with wisdom worth sharing. These aren't just lessons, they're lived experiences, real moments that reveal the mindset, the resilience, and the clarity behind lasting impact. Today, you're going to hear one of those stories. What does it take to lead 400 plus people through chaos and come out stronger? Today, we're unlocking the leadership playbook of Bridgett McMahan, president of BESCO, and one of the most respected operational minds in construction. She's led massive infrastructure projects, transformed toxic teams, and built a culture of clarity in one of the toughest industries out there. This episode is about leadership that actually works. Under pressure, in the real world, with real people. Let's get into it. This is Leadership Unlocked. Bridget, thank you. I am just delighted to have the opportunity to sit down with you today and learn from you and share your story. First off, I have to ask this question because it's just been all up in my head. When you were 9 years old and a little girl, did you envision that one day, like the life goal was to be the president of an electrical construction company? Was that always your life plan?
Not in a million years. In fact, not even in law school, because there were opportunities where lawyers, when you're in law school, to evaluate hanging your own shingle and running your own business, and what does that look like? And I steered away from that as farthest as I possibly could, thinking that was really scary. I don't want to do any of that. I just want to work for somebody and earn a paycheck. It always steered away from it until BESCO came along.
Wow. So even in law school, you weren't sitting there thinking about entrepreneurship or owning your own firm. It was, I'm going to kick ass, take names, be an incredible attorney, but I'm not wired to do the other stuff.
Not at all. In fact, I was totally scared of it. 100% steered away. I wanted to be the best damn lawyer I could at a big firm, working for somebody, always having a boss. And I'm really good at taking direction, but I never thought about running it.
Wow. So how the heck did you end up here?
Courage, advocacy, I feel like is how I got here. Being willing to pivot and change when the times were right. And it was just the perfect storm in my life where I was a new mom trying to balance my personal life and my work life. And to be honest, Dusty, I was doing a horrible job. I had my family screaming at me. I had my boss screaming at me. And I had a new baby who was also screaming. And I was trying to figure out, how in the world do new moms do this? And at that moment, I got a phone call from a friend who knew my resume, knew my passions, and said, I am trying to find some interview candidates for BESCO for this contract administration position, and your name continues to pop up. And I know you're really happy doing what you're doing, but would you ever consider? And I remember taking the call, taking the interview, it going phenomenally. I loved the team. I loved the people that I had met with. And I was pacing my driveway before I had officially accepted it, because it was this pivotal moment in my life of what I felt like was, I'm going to stop being in the courtroom. I'm going to stop being the lawyer that I had worked so hard in that dream of being that best lawyer that I could be. All of a sudden that was going to look different. And I had to get comfortable, and I had to ask myself if I could ever get really comfortable with not doing that. And the answer I got from a lot of people around me was, it's worth trying. Like, why is it not worth just trying? You can always go back. It's not like your law degree magically disappears when you decide to change, right? It was, if it didn't work out, go back into private practice. Go and do what you find to be your mission in life. It was that moment of like, I think I can try something different. I think I'm willing to explore an opportunity that didn't fit into the world that I had created in my head of what perfection was. And I am so glad I did. It opened doors, and I had people here that saw talents that I didn't even know I had. And it's been phenomenal.
So you've said a lot of things there that I want to double click on. And one, just there was a point of burnout. There's too much tension, too much stress. And I just want to make clear for our audience, and I don't even know all the details here, but you weren't a clerk in a corporate law environment where you're just, dealing with legal papers and wills and trusts and closing documents. You were with family advocacy. So the emotional engagement, I think it's one of the things that's so impressed me about you over the years, as well as what I think enables you to be a phenomenal servant leader, is your advocate's heart. Talk to us a little bit about your journey in law, because I think it's an important part of your story. You are helping people with your law degree, but not just in a technical manner.
Yeah.
Tell us just a little bit about that, because I think it sets up who you are as a leader.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, at 6 years old, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. It was in my heart. I had aspired to be nothing but a lawyer. Now, as I grew up, that started taking shape and form in different ways. Initially, I remember watching a movie with my dad, and it was the movie Speed. And I looked at my dad one day and I said, I want to be on the LAPD bomb squad. It was the first time words about my career had come out. And he said, honey, you can do anything you want in this world except for that. I said, I want to be a lawyer. A couple years later, my dad was formerly in the Marine Corps, and I wanted to be a Marine Corps JAG lawyer. And that was kind of my dream for a long time. Toward the end of it was 17, 18, as I graduated high school, I remember doing my senior thesis presentation on what it is that I wanted to do. And by that time, I remember my presentation was that I wanted to be the youngest woman on the U.S. Supreme Court. So constitutional law, advocacy, making laws, and being part of a team that set the precedent for how we need to evaluate our judicial system, fixing the judicial system in so many senses, was such a big part of what I found to drive me. I wanted to make change. It was through law school, that was pretty much my study goal for a long time. And then I made it to law school and was in my constitutional law class and realized I hated constitutional law. The idea that I couldn't be in a courtroom, that everyone else makes these arguments in these cases, and then you make the decision at the end after reading it all, that whether that precedent was the right precedent to have set. And I thought, no, I want to be in the courtroom. I want to be making history. I want to be the people that people read about on the Supreme Court, that's changing the way in which history is done. And so at that moment, realizing that, okay, well, if I don't like constitutional law, then what the world am I going to do? And there is something that I found so empowering is family law. And I don't really answer the why it was. As I was doing it, and I worked when I was in my second year of law school, I got a limited license, which is a person who can practice for a non-for-profit under the guidance of licensed lawyers. And so with that limited license, I was able to have courtroom experiences. And I did a lot of advocacy for abused women, with orders of protection, people seeking help and guidance, and hoping that the judicial system will step in and be a voice for their situation that they were seeking help for. And I've loved that. I started at the very bottom doing intake at a family justice center here in Knoxville, and worked my way up, making my way into private practice as a lawyer and having cases that dealt with a lot of pretty egregious claims in family law. And it's not just divorces and orders of protection, but it was also the really great things about family law, about adoptions, and seeing families united and come together, and being the person that can help bring the goods and bads into somebody's life you have an ethical obligation as a lawyer to zealously advocate for your client. And I took that to heart. I loved being able to provide somebody a voice that didn't have one or felt like they didn't have one. And I got to help discover that.
There's something that in your telling of that story that I think speaks loudly to your ability to walk in your driveway, trust and rely on mentors, and then make another career pivot, is that you've been making these pivots and adjustments throughout your entire life based on what you've learned, what you've seen, and where you felt called to go. But it's always been with a purpose of service. I would tend to agree with your dad. You can do anything what you want except for that. I have to remember that when my kids start bringing crazy stuff like that to bear. But you've pivoted, you've changed, but you've never lost your servant's heart. In fact, you've only grown it. When you came into BESCO, you came in then in a role that wasn't the president. And what was it like? You're making this change from courtroom and family law advocacy to corporate. What was that transition like for you?
It was difficult because I had to figure out who in my head was my client. Who was it that I needed to zealously advocate for, and who was going to do that? And for me to find value in what I was bringing to the table, I knew that was the piece that I needed to be able to answer for myself. I needed to have clarity around how I feel like I'm helping people. And my way of doing that at BESCO it was interesting. BESCO is an organization that had grown so fast that they didn't really have that in-house counsel for a long period of time. So the people here didn't understand what role a lawyer could bring. And I really that's both good and bad, because from a bad side, they were really hesitant and skeptical about who is this woman? What is she going to do? But on the good side of that is I got to shape what that looked like. They didn't have really a preconceived notion of what it is that I was supposed to do. I had a clean slate, and I got to write what that looked like. And for me, that was going to people's offices and sitting with them and reviewing contracts with them, talking about terms that they didn't understand and figuring out ways to help a person who is a fantastic electrician or a fantastic project manager, but didn't understand what the word indemnification meant. Okay, guess what? I can help you with that. That's the role that I can play. You need a bad guy when you're talking to your client about, we have to have that changed. Guess what? I can be your bad guy. Let me be that bad guy. And I got you. I get to be part of your team, and I get to save you from having that conversation that you don't want to have. And then the other piece that I got to do, which was just part of the job description that evolved out of my role, is I got to help create policies and procedures. And I didn't take that lightly here at BESCO, because that was really important. They didn't have any standard operating procedures that had been created, people were operating under. They wanted that in writing. They wanted to establish what that would look like as the onboarding process evolved. So I got to go sit with accounts receivable. I got to go sit with our accounts payable. I got to go sit with a project assistant or an executive assistant and talk about their day-to-day. What does that look like? What roles do you have? Why do you process that form the way in which you process that form? And that opened my eyes to understanding how the business was operating so that I could be an advocate for, wait a minute, we could make that change. What if we did something different? What if we processed that form this way? It would save this person over here time while also balancing your workload. And do you think that would be beneficial in bringing groups together then to explore different ways of working together? And all of a sudden you started seeing, by doing that, you started seeing people feeling like they had a voice at a table. They were changing a process. But in addition, I was learning and building a relationship that I hadn't had the opportunity to create yet. And that really helped stem how I got into the role I'm in today. Because it was those relationships that were built. People felt comfortable. People trusted me. They knew I wasn't out to get them. I wasn't out to be the bad guy. I was really there to support them and figure out, how do we do it better? I loved that. That's where I found my zealous advocacy. I love it. I have a strong passion for it.
I had no idea we were going to go here today, and that's what I love about these conversations. Just last week, I was working with a client, and the client, the young man asked me, they said, well, how do I connect and bring passion to something I'm doing if I don't even really agree with it, or if it's a policy thing? And my advice was very similar to what you just did, which is, well, then you need to connect your purpose. Why are you doing this work? Can you connect the dots? And you just outlined one of the most beautiful dot connection stories that I've heard in a long time, of saying, how do I deliver and deploy advocacy, my purpose, my passion in this role? And not just show up, you're not just performing the job description. You needed to connect the dots of why you're here, what it is you do, what it is you believe, and then find a way to do that in the organization. And when that happens, man, it's magical. It creates all the difference in the world. So thank you for sharing that. I can't overstate the importance of the ability to connect purpose to your work and how it just changes everything. And I think people really know it. I think people, they see it, they feel it, they taste it, they touch it. It's authentic. And your advocacy as you built those relationships is so incredibly authentic. And that's the other part of what you said. You didn't focus on the work, you focused on the relationship. And then how do you serve them? How do you create value for them? How do you impact their lives while performing the duties of your role, protecting the organization, all those other things? And man, it's all about relationships.
This wasn't 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. I was having dinner with my dad. And you have to remember, so my dad was in the construction industry. When I was growing up, he was a superintendent for a large general contractor, and he is a carpenter by trade. So as a superintendent in high school, I was living in a job trailer most of the time. I remember watching elections in the job trailer. I had dirty people. He was a big construction site at an airport, and so he had to be there overnight most of the nights, especially growing up in Seattle. We had a lot of rainfall. Rain would destroy construction projects especially when the building wasn't completely built in yet. Mm-hmm. So I lived on construction sites. And I remember telling my dad, I will never work construction. I am so over it. Never work construction. 3 weeks ago, we were having dinner and he said, Bridget, he had actually found a letter. That's how the conversation started. A letter that I had wrote him, and I was 9 or 10 years old. And he goes, look what I found. And I was reading this letter, and he goes, I was thinking about this. You told me, I remember, and you were 16 or 17, and you said, I'll never work construction. Look at you now. Like, look at where you are. And I said, I know. He goes, would you ever think? And I said, absolutely not. There is no way in any world in which I have ever contemplated I would be in the world in which I am today. He goes, why do you think? Yeah, that was his question to me. Why do you think you are? Where did you realize that you actually fit in? And I said, one, it's the people. I'm not an electrician. I will never be an electrician. I will never pretend to be an electrician or any of the trades in which we employ. But it's the people. I wake up and I walk down the hall, and you see the eyes of the people that look back at me and realizing that I have this huge burden every day of making sure that they're safe and that their families are taken care of, and that is, I love my people. I wake up looking forward to seeing my team and the people that work here and realizing that I'm not sure that there is anyone who has as much passion and feeling of needing to protect the people that are here than I do. It is making sure that when I wake up every morning, I wake up excited. I love coming to work. I love doing what I do. But I do feel like I have this weight, and I take it really seriously, that my job is to make sure that they're all okay every day. And I love that because I won't fail.
You know, and I know this about you because we've known each other for a few years now. I know that you begin, and BESCO begins every meeting with a safety moment. And I know how seriously you take safety. And again, it's advocacy. How do you protect your people? And For those who haven't led in environments where safety is a real factor that you have to, you never really sleep all that soundly. You're always afraid of the 2 a.m. call or whatever it is. And, when someone says, how was your day? Everybody was safe. That's a great place to start and, and finish. So I love that you threw it out in the universe that you would never work in construction, and God just said, okay, let's see about that.
There's definitely a higher power than me that has a plan, and sometimes you just have to listen.
Sometimes you just have to listen. Most leaders don't need more advice. They simply need clarity. That's what the Vision to Victory scorecard is all about. It's free, it's fast, and it gives you a clear picture of where you are and what's next. Start now at clarityalignmentexecution.com. Let's make sure that your next step forward is the right one. All right, so every leader has defining moments. I know that you've had dozens through your career and your leadership career. Let's pick one out. Pick a defining moment for you where there was a challenge. It challenged how you lead. You needed to step back. Just, if you don't mind, share a story about a leadership moment that challenged you, and then we'll talk about what you learned, how you processed, whatever it is. But what was a good defining challenge for you, or a moment where you were really challenged as a leader?
The one that really comes to heart, and I've thought about this one a lot more recently, especially being in the role that I'm in today, it was the start of COVID. So February 2020, my boss at the time, who I had worked for during my tenure at BESCO leading up to this point, we had just gotten over a board meeting, and he wasn't feeling well, and I could see it on his face. Something was wrong, and I didn't completely know what, but his health has started to degrade, and he was standing in my doorway. He told me he was going in the following morning for a stress test as just a precautionary measure, and that he would be in. It was really letting me know he was just going to be in a little bit late. And I was like, yep, no problem, but call me on your way in. He said, yes, ma'am. And he left that evening, and he called me the following morning, and he said, Bridget, I have been told I need to head to the hospital. His stress test was not good, and he was probably going to have to undergo surgery, but he needed some further testing, and he needed to not stop at any lights, just head there and check himself in. And I said, okay. Obviously completely panicked. Come to find out, he ended up having triple bypass surgery.
Wow.
And it occurred at 6 a.m. the following morning. 2 years prior to that date, my boss had hired a individual as the president of the company. So my boss was the CEO. He hired in a president. And then underneath the president was myself as a VP of admin, and then our controller of the organization. So at that moment, end of February of 2020, my boss goes in for a triple bypass, and he is going to be out of the business. This is the first time in 36 years that he was out of the business. Every single day, even while on vacation, took phone calls. He was never truly out of the business, even when he was not in the business. This was going to be the first time in history of him overseeing the company, which really then put the business in the hands of the president at the time. And I remember me and this president at the time, we didn't work well together leading up to February 2020. Not that we had a contentious relationship. It's just that neither one of us understood the role in which we played. Mm. His value in my position, was not how I valued my position. We didn't see eye to eye in a lot of things. But ultimately, I now reported to a boss, and it was overnight that changed. Mm. And somebody that, not that I hadn't worked well with, just I hadn't worked often with. And 2020, keeping in mind, so March 2020 hits, and this is when COVID really opens, the floodgates open, life starts changing for everyone. This was, and any HR or legal person will tell you that this was their nightmare. Mm-hmm. I oversaw both parts of the business. So I was handling the writing of the policy while also handling the enforcement of the policy. I was handling the tracking and measuring regulations from government to private sector, to all the instances that needed to change and the different accounts that were happening. Constant change. Every day looked different and every project looked different. So
Hey.
the person had a different concern. And from an HR side, taking all those calls, fielding the inquiries about what is BESCO doing to keep people safe. All of that was on my plate. And it was for several months. That was my heartbeat of pretty much everything I did for days upon days. And post 6 months from that moment, then 6 months forward, Wayne kind of makes this decision. I'm ready to retire. I don't want to be in the business anymore. My health is not the way it used to be. I'm not the young man I thought I was. And I think I'm ready to get out. And he makes this announcement that he's going to be retiring and probably not going to be entering back into the business at any point. And it was devastating for me because I really then came to like the moment, the self-reflection moment was, oh crap, you now work for the president. Again, the relationship really still hadn't gotten any better. It wasn't that it was worse. It just wasn't the same. The business wasn't the same. The value the same. And I was struggling to try to get that back. And I knew I wasn't. So the ownership group, playing a big role in the organization at that time, the ownership group reached out and asked the question, like, what's the plans? What are you going to do? How do you support the president in the role that he's in? And I thought, I'm not sure I can. Maybe this is that moment of time. I need to back away and say, this makes perfect sense. The organization expected the president to take over the role once Wayne was out. It made perfect sense. There was not going to be this upset, but I'm not sure that this is the role that I need to be playing. Maybe the company, as it looks different under different leadership, this was my time to exit. And I really struggled with trying to figure out if that's what the writing on the wall was saying to me. Now get back into private practice. Now's your time to move on. You've left this legacy. The company is better for what you have done. Now's your time. And I said those words out loud instead of just having them in my internal voice. I said it out loud, and I made those comments to the ownership group that the company is in great hands. This is where it's going to be, but I think it's my time to exit. And it was interesting that wasn't what they had in store. They had a different vision for where the business was going to go. Being my own advocate, so fast forward now, the CEO ends up coming back into the business. President decides that it's time for his departure, actually. So you have this whole change in the leadership structure. And you fast forward 6 months from that point, Wayne comes back in, but he says, I'm only going to be here a year. So now you have the president who's exited. You have the CEO who has a 1-year exit strategy, and the business still left with, what are we going to do? And it was in a board meeting that I raised my hand and said, why not me? Why not give me a shot? I know the business. I know the why. I don't necessarily, and I will never understand the how you install that outlet, how you install that light fixture. But I can answer the question of why we install the light fixture. Why is it that we are so great? What makes BESCO special? And why not give me a shot for that reason? Like, I know the business, I know the people, and it might be worth just trying versus going out and hiring somebody and taking the risk that they come into an organization and they do make the changes. Why not give me a shot? And had it not been for my own voice, standing up for myself, it would never have happened. And that was the tipping point for how I got into the role I'm in, is because it was at that moment the board was considering going in a completely different direction. And they stopped in their tracks. They listened to what I had to say. They asked my boss at the time, like, what do you think? And his response was, there is no one in this organization that knows it better than she does. So if you would consider promoting somebody from within, she is your only option. Otherwise, you need to go out and look externally. And the board listened. The advocacy for myself, the moment of, I think I could do it. I put my fears aside and realized that I had something to offer, that my sense of wanting to protect what has been built for so long outweighed my own fear of potentially failing or not doing well. I had a sense of like duty that I owed the people that were here to try to keep the organization intact and feeling the same way and being the same organization that we knew we could be. That was a defining moment in my life, was being able to stand up in a room full of people that weren't necessarily my advocates, but did give me the opportunity, and they listened.
Thank you for sharing that. There's a lot of richness in that story, from moment of, okay, how do I lead immediately? You know, the CEO's got to leave tomorrow morning. Things have changed. Like we always have a plan until life punches us in the face. I think it's Mike Tyson that said that, you know. And then there's a shift. And I really like how when you talk about the relationship you have with the president, you know, you just I didn't hear a single finger pointing. He didn't get me. It was really, I didn't understand. We didn't understand each other. We weren't on the same page. And there was no undermining. There's no, you know, it's just, this is what I believe. And the fact that you paused and said it out loud, hey, I think this may be a chance this may be the inflection point for me to leave the organization. I'm leaving it better than I got here. I can leave head held high. And there's so much strength and leadership that comes from navigating through, looking inwards, going to peers and outwardly saying these things that need to be said, but then, you know, letting it sit, but being ready when the moment struck. Were you planning on walking into that board meeting that day? You know, how long had you been working on that stand up and why not me speech? Was that something that happened very organically, or is it something that you realized over a period of time that this was your opportunity to raise your hand and, you know, and grab the mantle, so to speak?
Dusty, I'm going to tell you, and most people do not believe me, but I promise, I swear, the board meeting agenda was put together and the conversation had derailed from the agenda. I had no knowledge that the conversation was going to go and pivot because it wasn't my board meeting, right? The CEO at this time had come back into the organization. He was leading the board meeting. He had put his agenda together and he was talking about another topic. And I don't recall exactly what that topic was, but I remember there being a question that got asked. And Wayne's answer to that question was, guys, remember, I gave you 1 year and we're 6 months through that 1 year. You have 6 months left to find my replacement. And to my knowledge, you have done nothing. And it was at that moment that and I'm sitting at the end of the table looking down, and the look on the faces of the board members was this like complete surprise, the realization of, oh crap, he's right. What are we going to do? And I think if I remember correctly, I remember Wayne saying at that time, I think you all thought that I would be staying. I'm not. I am going to be leaving in 6 months. So December, I am out. And there was, you know, that aha moment in that room, and you could tell some of the whisperings and what are we going to do? And amongst themselves, they were talking about, do we call this company? Do we call this person? Maybe they could start conspiring with one another of like, what are we going to do? What's the next step? Who do we call? How do we put this plan of action in place? This is ours. And I remember them telling him, we thought you were looking for your replacement. We want you to be who that is. And his response was, I'm not going to be around. This isn't my choice. This is yours. I had no knowledge that this conversation was going to take place in that meeting at that moment, at that time. I hadn't had any conversations leading up to that conversation. It was completely spontaneous. I then raised my hand at the end of the table. And I can't tell you why. I have no idea what the world came over me at that moment in time. It was just as they were talking about bringing somebody from the outside into this organization, it terrified me. And it was one of those moments that did not sit right because I knew how I felt having had a president who was in that seat that I felt like was starting to shift the organization in a manner that he wanted, and it didn't fit right for me. And I knew it didn't fit right for some of the other people in the organization either. And so it was at that, I think it was just pure fear. It was, I love this company so much. I want to be here. But if they bring somebody in, this could be my exit. And so I think out of fear, I raised my hand and said, I think statistically, 70% of hires that you bring in from the outside, especially in C-suite positions, fail. Mm-hmm. And the idea that we could have multiple people, like this churn of leaders in our company, was going to create hesitancy and skepticism across our culture. And we have such a good, strong culture, and it's unique because we are a family company. We are a family business. We are a big company, but family valued business. And out of just pure fear, it was this, I know at least I could keep that intact. I knew what we were. I knew the why behind what we were. And I knew that if they had just given me a shot, I knew that I could at least, if nothing else, I could just continue doing exactly what we were doing because I knew it. I didn't know if I could grow it. I didn't know if I could do all the things that a CEO is supposed to be able to do, but I knew that I could do the status quo. And I thought at that moment, why not me? Why not give me a shot then? And let's see if I could make something happen. It's got to be better than 70% failure rate. And that, I think those were exactly my words. Like, it's got to be worth giving me a shot. I've got to be better than 70%. The eyes kind of went off and it was like, well, and that's what they said. Put your plan together. Show me how you would do it, because I wasn't coming from operations. And at that time, in our portfolio of companies, I would have been the first president, first one female president, first female under 40, and first female that didn't come from an operations background. And so I needed to be able to prove to the ownership group why they should invest in me and my ideas.
There's the old saying that, luck favors the prepared, or something like that. It's the hard work you do day in and day out that when opportunity knocks, you're ready to grab it. And it sounds like this was your opportunity. It knocked, and it wasn't planned. It wasn't premeditated. It sounds terrible to say it that way. It wasn't something that you were working on walking in. It was all of the work that you put in for years before to be prepared for that moment. When you look back now, Bridget, what's a mindset or a belief or a tool that came out of this experience for you? What have you, if you can, take some lesson from that experience, what's a framework or a tool that you can pull from that moment now?
The one that I have learned, and I believe it to my core, Dusty, is trust my gut, trust my heart. I don't know that as a younger woman that I did those things. I think women actually have a stronger sixth sense than most people, that we know what, we have a feeling, we know something doesn't feel right or something feels right, but we hesitate to act on that feeling because we can't prove it out. There's not enough words that we know to be able to communicate that is the best thing or that's the right thing, and here's the why behind it. Sometimes just I know it's not, and I can't tell you why it's not, but I trust myself enough to say no. And I think being in the role that I'm in, that has been the hardest lesson, is being able to communicate to people around me that I might not be able to tell you the exact precise reason why I can't do that or why we should do this, but I can tell you it's a feeling. And I trust myself and I trust what my calling is. Like, I just trust myself enough to know that that's the right thing. The people around me would tell you 99.999% when I just say those words, they have been right. And I think we just have to listen to ourselves instead of second guessing all the time. Hindsight's always 2020. You know, I had a great boss that once said, don't overgrip the club. Sometimes go try. And you might not have all the answers. But as long as you're not going to do harm, right, then go try. Go and adventure. Go and ask the question. Go and try something different. That has been something I have worked really hard, especially as an attorney with an attorney mindset. You know, is attorneys tend to be very black and white, and they need to be because that's their. But as a CEO, as a leader, you need to learn to live in gray. And not everything needs to be black and white. And you need to find gray because that's how you're going to build relationships and camaraderie and loyalty, because people are going to know that it's not black and white, that you can meet them in the middle.
What you just articulated to me is it's so easy to get caught up in data points. Like the data says this and the investor says this or whatever it is, right? Your gut instinct is a data point, and it's a triangulation point that you can use to make a better decision. Is it going to be perfect? Who knows? But trusting yourself, the body of experiences you have, you know, all of the unique experiences, elements, things you've learned that give you the insight necessary. I think it's a super powerful tool, and one that most people far too easily discount. It doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
I can speak for myself. Every time I've made a decision where I've ignored or distrusted my gut instinct, I can't think of very many where it actually turned out okay. You know, most of the time I've gone back and went, you know, something was trying to tell me and I wasn't listening. And I know for me, it's reinforced an importance and a desire to listen, both to others around the table and then to listen to and trust myself and my own instincts. And thank you for unlocking that for us and for our audience. Like, it gives me some things to think about as I'm, like we all are, we're all wrestling with things every single day. And I think I then know the answer to this question. If you were to put that into a soundbite, so to speak, and give someone some advice, how would you package this unlock that you just gave us, this story, this trust your gut? How would you package that to someone on your team or to another leader as an advice or a tool that they can use in their life?
I think I would tell anyone that you are more powerful than you realize. Your voice matters. And sometimes it's worth using your outside voice. Even when you think that people aren't listening, say it anyway, because I guarantee it will make an impact to someone. And if you don't feel like you're heard, say it again.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's so well said. I guarantee that will be one of those things that I might get printed out for myself because it's just so important. All right. Well, I'm going to shift us a little bit, and this is where I get to have a little bit of fun. I'm having a tremendous amount of fun, but I get to have a little bit more fun. It's not at your expense, I promise. And just got some rapid fire questions, and they can be as long of an answer as you want. But a few things that I'd love to learn more about, and I know our audience would love to learn more about you and how you show up. First off, what is a book that you believe every leader, everyone who is charged with the care and service of others should read? What's a book you would recommend?
Dusty, I'm going to be a little bit more specific.
Please.
I think every woman leader needs to read the book Gravitas.
Gravitas. Okay, I'm adding that to my list. I'm not a woman leader, but I'm adding that to my list right now. Tell me why.
This book was one of the first books when I was announced as president, I went to a conference and the author of the book was doing a presentation on the material of the book and it hadn't been published yet. So it was somewhat premature, but she was telling about the contents of the book. And the way in which it got framed was she does this leadership quiz and style, but she brings it back to Sex and the City and the characteristics of the characters in that show and how you relate to them. And then it's all about the way in which leaders think about confidence and the level of confidence that you need to have when you walk into a boardroom and you realize you're the only woman in that room. And how are you going to be heard? And what are the obstacles you're going to face? And it was one of those books that just gave me, as a new leader, as somebody in a new role, figuring out the kind of leader that I wanted to be. It brought to me a level of feeling like I wasn't alone. This book was written so that I didn't feel like I was walking into a room alone. I had a whole bunch of people, even if it was imaginary, standing behind me, clapping me on, saying, "You've got this and you're ready to lead a company of 700 people." And I needed that.
And you're doing it in an industry that's dominated by men. It is outside. I mean, it's not, I think that I'm going to go read this because I think that lesson speaks to everyone to walk into a room and be confident and here's what you need to know. But man, to especially do it in the situation you were in and in the industry you were in and in the role you're going into, to have that fiber, that courage, all those things, and to not do it alone. No one should walk alone. Period, full stop.
People say, being at the top is lonely. It is so true. Everyone is watching me all the time. If I'm angry one day, it's what's wrong? What's the business doing? And it's always related to the business. She's angry, she's mad, she's scared, and they'll take any expression, any comment and create a narrative that may or may not be true. It's never personal. It's always business, right? I'm scared, the business is failing. I'm nervous, I'm mad, the business is failing. And so realizing that everyone is watching me all the time means that I have to have a good poker face when I open the door. We are good. And if we're not good, everyone's going to hear about it not being good. At the same time, let's have that conversation. Let's make sure we're communicating equally across the board. But it's realizing that you can't go and walk down the hall to the friend that you eat lunch with every other day and say, "Guess what? X person just quit. What are we going to do? Like, this is going to upset the business." You can't have those conversations. And so you have to internalize so much. It is lonely at the top. They say that, and it's reality.
100% is. And I think when people step into that seat, it's never something you understand until you're there. And then you're like, oh, wow. Every sniffle, every sneeze, everything is always seen. And it's not about you. It's always about them and what it means to them. And, in the mind of the believer, a perception is a fact. And the stories that are created, it's lonely at the top. And you shouldn't have to be alone. So I'm so glad that you found a mechanism in a book, and I know that a lot of our audience will appreciate that as well. Make sure we put a link in the show notes for everyone. What is the best leadership advice that you've ever received?
You can do anything you set your mind to.
Why? Why is that? How has that landed with you from a leadership perspective? What is it that means for you?
I just think it's one of those sayings that we hear all the time, especially women hear all the time, but you don't ever believe it. You don't think you can, or we don't get to see a lot of women CEOs. We don't get to see, and when you see something, you believe it. And so it's being okay with taking the leap because you believe in yourself. And sometimes that's all you need. And when you believe in yourself, you will challenge yourself. You'll take a leap of faith that not everyone will, and it will start opening doors and allowing people to see options. And that's how we make the next generation better. Like, that's by opening doors and showing people that it's real and that there are opportunities and possibilities out there. And there are women mechanics, and there are women electricians, and there are women plumbers, and there are women CEOs leading construction companies. It's just, you can do anything if you set your mind to it.
I love that. All right. What's a daily practice that makes you a better leader?
Sleep.
Sleep is a superpower. Do you get
I
enough?
try really hard to sleep. And listen, I think that that's my superpower. I think that's the one thing that I do. I try really hard to do well is listen. I know you know this because of our relationship, but when I first got into the role as president, part of my strategy that I presented back to the ownership group was, I am not going to do this alone. I can't do this alone. So I created a team around me of people, not just all the leaders in the business, but I created a special group around me that were people I had identified that were in the business that I trusted to help me lead the organization. People I knew I can go to and that they would challenge me, respectfully challenge me. Think you need, I think you ought to, this looks different. And it was a brain trust. We could disagree with one another, but I also knew this small group of people that I would go to and consult with and ask questions of, they would give me answers and give me ideas and thoughts that I could then think through and come back to the organization and help make decisions. But I also knew that they had my back. So when I opened that door and that meeting was over, I knew, and a decision was made, that team was going to say, we made the decision to fill in the blank. Not she did. I don't know where she's going. I don't know why she did that. The answer that came out of that room consistently over and over again was, we made the decision. We decided to. We decided not to. We did this. And the team that I trusted, I could not do this role alone. And I still don't. To this day, and I've been in my role now going in 5 years, I still have that same group of people that I go and consult with, and I ask their opinions and I ask their thoughts on where the business is and what's going on and who's leading what. And we consult all the time. And I think it's doing this kind of role together as a team, as one. I couldn't imagine doing it alone.
So you said leadership superpower is listening, and then what I would view as just a solid gold leadership practice is this assemblage of a team that ensures that you're not doing it alone. They're not just rubber stamping what you believe, but you're actually leveraging your superpower, but then they're walking out of there supporting the decision that they have felt part of and brought into, and knowing that their voices are valued and heard, even if it's you're making a decision that's different or not what they might have expected. I think that as a leadership practice is something that so many organizations, so many leaders could use to really create a multiplier effect. Like the sum is truly greater than the parts when you have this team, and they're not just your direct reports. I think that's an important distinction. This isn't just your executive team. These are leaders of and in the organization who are part of leading the organization. I honestly think that is one of the most brilliant things that I've heard any leader do. And it is made more powerful, or more exponentially more powerful, because of how you show up as a leader, humbly there to listen, there to learn, and really focusing on helping the organization make better decisions. So I think it works because of who you are as a leader. And I think it works when a leader shows up and listens like that. And it's one of those tools that should be on a leader's tool belt, but they've got to have all the ingredients to make it successful. So thank you for sharing that one. That one's for everyone's, because it's always great to have a label. What do you call this team? What is your name for this group?
I call them my GOLD team. And GOLD stands for goals, opportunities, leadership, and diversity is how the name was created. And those are all values or attributes that I have a high value I place a high value on. They are all things that I strive and I think about every single day. And that's how the Gold team was created.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. That wasn't, I know, necessarily one of our boxes to check, but I think that's just solid gold. Oh, man, that was a terrible pun. Okay. Bridget, what's a cause or an organization that you're passionate about supporting?
So CASA is the court-appointed special advocates. And specifically, there's lots of them. Most counties have them. I participate in the one in East Tennessee. But court-appointed special advocates are volunteers that join the judicial system to help represent the best interest of a child that's going through the juvenile court system. So it gives them a voice, because you don't ever want to you can't really put an 18-month-old up on the witness bench and into a courtroom, and you don't want to expose them to some of the things that are going on in our judicial system, the fights or the judges, and it's scary. And it can be really overwhelming, even for a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old. And so through a CASA representative, a child can meet somebody who is a grown-up, but somebody who can understand what they're going through, and meet them where they are, go to their school, talk to them, have lunch with them, and then take that information back to a judge and articulate what they have discovered and found, and they can be a voice for the child. And I feel like that's something that is going to only make our judicial system better.
Do you have to be an attorney to be a volunteer?
No, you need no qualifications other than you need to like children.
And have an advocate's heart. Well, we'll put a link in the show notes for that. Is that something just in East Tennessee, or is that something that is across, many systems and jurisdictions?
Many jurisdictions, many cities and counties all across the United States.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that. And where can our audience learn more about you or learn more about BESCO? And if they're wanting to be part of a purpose-driven, value-centric organization like BESCO, and they're whether they're an electrician or a support person, how can they learn more?
You can visit our website, www.besco.com. We also have a LinkedIn page and Facebook page, BESCO, BESCO. And you can follow the organizations there. We post our culture videos quite frequently, so you can see all about who we are and what we do.
Awesome. Bridget, thank you. This conversation reminds me so much of what it means to show up as a leader with a servant's heart, to be an advocate for others, and to really, not through a desire to be in a role, but in a desire to create an impact. That's what creates those opportunities. So thank you for sharing your lessons, your tools, and your journey with us. Like these moments, I feel like we could talk for hours more, and we would just be scratching the surface of all the things that you've learned. So we'll definitely have to have you back. Thank you. If you could leave any one final thought with our listeners about growth, resilience, leadership, purpose, what would it be?
My final words would just be, it's okay to say yes. It's okay to pivot and change. And sometimes it's just trying. Say yes, try it.
Love it. Thank you, Bridget. Folks, if today's story challenged or inspired you, be sure to subscribe to Leadership Unlocked on your favorite platform. And just thank you for listening. Go lead, go serve, go make an impact.
Thank you, Dusty.
If today's episode gave you something to think about, something to apply, then there's more where that came from. Head over to arcusgroup.com and sign up for our newsletter. It's where we share tools, insights, and our leadership frameworks to help you lead with more clarity, more alignment, and more impact. No fluff, just what helps you lead better. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time on Leadership Unlocked.